I laid 3 pieces of paper on my mother's kitchen table and turned them around so they faced her. 6 years. I lived in my grandmother's house. I bathed her. I fed her. I carried her to the bathroom at 3 in the morning. And I never took $1 for any of it. Then my mother put a typed letter in my hand and gave me 30 days to get out of that house. Here is what she did not know. The deed she used to take that house carried my grandmother's signature, and that signature was dated exactly 7 days after a doctor wrote, in ink, that my grandmother could no longer sign anything at all. Today, I read property records for a living. I find the broken link in a chain of title. I find the signature that does not belong and the date that does not add up. And 4 springs after that letter, on a slow Friday afternoon, I pulled the records on the one address I know by heart. My mother had a saying. She loved, "Family doesn't keep receipts." She said it every time I asked a question about money. She was about to learn exactly who does. My name is Nora Calloway. I am 36 years old, and I examine property titles in Richmond, Virginia. Before I tell you how a typed letter turned into a court order, do me one small favor. If you have ever been the person your whole family counted on for everything and counted as nothing, tap like and subscribe, and drop your city in the comments, so I know who is out there. This story is for you. Now let me take you back 6 years before that letter, to the morning my grandmother's left hand stopped working. 6 years before the letter, on an ordinary Tuesday in October, my grandmother Esther was making coffee when the cup slid out of her fingers. She was 80 years old. She called it clumsiness. The emergency room called it a stroke, not a big one. The kind that ends things all at once. A small one. The kind that starts things. The kind that begins a long, slow leaving. Esther May Prewitt was my mother's mother, and she was the only adult in my childhood who ever looked at me like I was a person instead of a resource. My father died when I was 12. And after that, our house ran on my mother Lorraine's rules. Lorraine's rules were simple. My younger brother, Marcus, was the one you protected. I was the one you deployed. Marcus forgot things, so I remembered them. Marcus struggled, so I cover. Marcus had feelings, so I had responsibilities. Nobody ever wrote this down. Nobody had to. 3 days after the stroke, my mother called a family meeting in the hospital cafeteria. She had a legal pad. She always had a legal pad. She said Grandma Esther could not live alone anymore in the house on Fenwick Street, and someone needed to move in. Then she looked at Marcus, and she looked at me, and she did the math out loud. Marcus has the kids, she said. Marcus has a family. Nora, you are the strong one. It has to be you. I was 26. I had a small apartment I loved, a bookkeeping job at a dental practice, and a life that was finally starting to look like mine. I want you to understand something about that moment. I did not agree because I was weak. I agreed because I loved Esther more than I loved my apartment. That part I have never regretted, not once. Not once. What I regret is what I did not ask, because while I was packing boxes, my mother was doing paperwork. 2 weeks after I moved into the house on Fenwick Street, Lorraine showed up with a folder and a pen. She had Esther sign a power of attorney. That is a document that let my mother sign checks, pay bills, and make decisions in my grandmother's name. On its face, that is a reasonable thing for a family to do. Somebody has to handle the pharmacy and the property taxes. My mother volunteered for the money the way I had been volunteered for the body. She took the checkbook. I took the 3 a.m. shifts. And at the time, I honestly thought I had the better end of the deal. Here is what our arrangement looked like. In practice, my mother managed Esther's accounts from her own house across town, 20 minutes away. I lived in the spare bedroom next to Esther's room with a baby monitor on the nightstand. I cut my bookkeeping job to part-time. I learned how to check blood pressure, how to crush pills into applesauce, how to talk someone back from a panic at 2 in the morning when they wake up and do not know what year it is. And every evening, no matter what kind of day it had been, I did one small thing that became a ritual. I turned on the porch light. Esther liked it on. She said a lit porch was how a house told the street somebody was home and somebody was expected. So every night at dusk, I flipped that switch. 6 years. I do not think I missed 10 nights. Money came up for the first time about 4 months in. The water heater died in January, and I paid a plumber $400 out of my own checking account. Because Esther was having a bad week, and I did not want strangers and phone calls in the house. When I mentioned it to my mother and asked if Esther's account could pay me back, Lorraine gave me a smile I would come to know very well. It was patient. It was almost sorry for me. Nora, she said, family doesn't keep receipts. That was the first time I heard the saying. It would not be the last. And I want you to notice what a perfect little machine that sentence is. It sounds like love. It functions like a lock. It means the giving flows one direction and the accounting flows nowhere. And if you ever ask a question, the question itself becomes the offense. If you have ever had a sentence like that used on you, a sentence that made you feel greedy for asking where your own money went, then you already understand my mother. And I have not even told you what she did yet. So I stopped asking. I paid the water heater. Then I paid the gutters, then the ramp for the front steps. When Esther's walker arrived, I started paying the utility bills directly because my mother was slow to send checks, and I could not stand watching Esther fret about a past due notice. Light, gas, water, and the little extras a sick house eats. It came to about $310 a month out of my pocket. Every month for the entire 6 years. $310 a month. For 72 months, that is $22,320. I did not add that up until much later. And when I finally did, I had to sit down. That is a new car. I never drove. That is 2 full years of the rent I would end up paying. After they put me out, my mother had the checkbook to an account that could have covered every penny of it. She let me carry it instead. And she called my carrying it love. Meanwhile, across town, decisions were being made in rooms I was never in. Stay with me here, because this next part is where the story stops being sad and starts being a crime. About a year into my time on Fenwick Street, Esther had a stretch of very good months. The spring after the stroke, her speech came back strong. Her humor came back stronger. And one warm afternoon, she asked my aunt, my mother's younger sister, to drive her downtown. She did not ask my mother. She did not ask me. I only learned where they went. Much later, they went to a free legal clinic. And my grandmother, on one of the clearest days of her last years, made a will. A will with 2 witnesses, my aunt being one of them. Everything signed and dated properly. And in that will, she left the house on Fenwick Street to me. She also named me executor, which means the person A will puts in charge of carrying it out. She never breathed a word of it to my mother, but she did tell me, sort of, in her own way. That summer, on a good evening, we were sitting on the porch under that lit bulb, and she patted my knee and said, "This house knows whose it is, Nora. I have seen to it. It is all written down." I laughed and told her not to talk like that. She pointed her chin at the front door, toward the living room, where an old blue cookie tin sat on the shelf, by her chair. You know the tin. Every grandmother in America has one. A round blue tin that promises butter cookies and delivers sewing supplies, buttons, thread, a thimble, dead batteries, coupons from stores that closed years ago. Esther kept hers within arm's reach her whole life, and she was always fussing with it. That evening, she looked at it a beat too long. And then she looked at me, and then she changed the subject to tomatoes. I thought nothing of it. Remember that tin? That is all I am going to say for now. The good months did not last. Strokes like Esther's rarely come alone. They come like weather, one front after another, each one taking a little more. By the 3rd year, she was repeating questions. By the 4th year, she was losing the thread of the day, then the week, then, on hard afternoons, the decade. Her doctors called it vascular dementia, which is just the medical way of saying the strokes were slowly turning out the lights. One room at a time. And I want to be precise here, because precision is the whole point of this story. Dementia is not a light switch. It is a dimmer. She had bad days and better days. But by that 4th winter, even the better days were not what they had been, and everyone who spent time with her knew it. Her neurologist certainly knew it. Hold on to that. Now let me tell you about the woman with the leather binder, because this is a detail that matters later. It was a Tuesday in March, a little over 2 years before the letter. I had taken Esther's laundry to the laundromat because the dryer was acting up, and I came home an hour earlier than usual. There was a silver sedan in the driveway I did not recognize. As I came up the walk, the front door opened and a woman stepped out. 60s, church clothes, and a wide leather binder held against her chest, like a Bible. My mother was right behind her. And my mother's face did something I had never seen it do. It flinched. Just for a half second. Then it smoothed over into hostess mode. "This is Miss Odette from church," she said. She was helping me with some insurance paperwork for Grandma. The woman with the binder smiled at me, said what a blessing I was, and drove off. I carried the laundry inside. Esther was asleep in her chair, with a pen on the table beside her. A pen. My grandmother had not written so much as a grocery list in over a year. I remember noticing it. I remember a small, cold feeling walking across the back of my neck, and I remember deciding it was nothing, because the alternative was a thought I was not ready to have about my own mother. If you have ever talked yourself out of your own eyes like that, you know exactly how it is done. You do it out of love. That is the terrible part. The lie gets in, wearing love's coat. Things moved faster. After that winter, Esther needed more help than one exhausted granddaughter could give. So I arranged a day aide 3 mornings a week, and, you guessed it, The aide's copays and extras found their way to my side of the ledger, too. The ledger that officially did not exist. Marcus visited 4 times in 6 years. I counted. The way you count things, you wish you could stop counting. He came at Christmas, stayed 90 minutes, and left before the dishes. Each time, my mother narrated his visit for weeks afterward, like it was a moon landing. Marcus is so good with her. Marcus lights her right up. I fed her 700 dinners and became furniture. He ate one and became a saint. I am not telling you this so you will be angry at him. I am telling you so you understand the operating system I grew up inside. In my family, love was not something you did. It was something my mother assigned. Near the end of that last spring, Esther had one final run of clear days, the way people sometimes do, like a lamp surging bright before the filament goes. On one of those days, she grabbed my wrist while I was fixing her pillows. Her grip shocked me. It was her old grip, the one from my childhood, the one that could break a green bean clean in half with 2 fingers. She pulled me down close and she said, "The tin, baby. It is in the tin." I said, "What is, Grandma?" She looked at me with total clarity for about 2 seconds, and then the clarity washed out like a tide going, and she asked me if my father was coming for supper. My father, who had been gone for 20 years. I kissed her forehead and said yes. He would be along. You learn to do that. You learn to stop dragging them back to your world and just visit theirs. I did not think about the tin again for 4 years. When you finish this video, you will never forget it. Esther died on a Sunday morning in late May, in her own bed, in her own house, with her hand in mine and the radio playing low, in the kitchen. She was 86. The last thing she ever said to me 2 days before was thank you. Though I honestly do not know if it was meant for me or for someone in a memory, I have decided it was for me. I am allowed to decide that. It is one of the only things from that spring. Anyone? Let me keep. The funeral was my mother's finest performance. I say that without sarcasm. It is simply a fact. She wept beautifully. She accepted casseroles like a head of state accepting treaties. She stood at the front of the church and told 100 people that caring for her mother these past years had been the honor of her life. I sat in the 3rd pew in a black dress I bought with a coupon and listened to my 6 years get filed under her name. My aunt found me by the coat rack afterward, squeezed my hand hard, and said, "I know. Honey, I know." 2 words. Twice. At the time, I thought she was just being kind. She was actually being a witness, but I would not understand that for 4 more years. 2 weeks after the funeral, on a Saturday morning at 9:15, my mother's car pulled into the driveway on Fenwick Street, and Marcus's truck pulled in behind it. I remember the time exactly because I was on the porch with coffee. And I had just been thinking that I should start looking through Esther's desk for the will she had once hinted at. My mother came up the walk, holding a folder. Marcus stayed a step behind her with his hands in his pockets, studying the yard like it owed him money. Nobody sat down. My mother took a single typed page out of the folder and held it out to me, and she said, "Nora, we need to talk about your living situation." I read it, standing up. It was a letter addressed to me, informing me that the owner of the property required me to vacate within 30 days. The owner of the property. I read that phrase 3 times, and I looked up and said the stupidest sentence of my life. I said, "Mom, this is Grandma's house," and my mother tilted her head with that patient, almost sorry smile and said, "No, sweetheart, it is my house. It has been my house for over 2 years." And she slid a second page out of the folder. It was a copy of a deed. A quitclaim deed, which I now know is the simplest piece of paper there is for handing over a house. No sale. No money changing hands. No questions asked. Just the owner's signature, a notary stamp. And it is done. This one transferred the house on Fenwick Street from Esther May Prewitt to Lorraine Calloway. It was signed and stamped in March, a little over 2 years before that morning, and it had been recorded at the county courthouse 8 days later, which means it was official, public. And, as far as I knew standing on that porch, bulletproof, at the bottom sat my grandmother's signature, shaky, but hers. Under it sat a round purple notary stamp, the licensed seal that is supposed to prove the right person really signed. In the room of their own free will, I said, "There is a will," Grandma told me. There was a will. My mother did not blink. "There is no will," she said. I went through every drawer in this house during hospice. There is no will, and even if some old paper turned up, it would not matter. Because the house was never in her estate to give, she had signed it to me long before she passed. And here is the sentence she chose to say next. Standing on the porch I had repainted, under the light I had kept burning for 6 years, she said, "You can take your personal things, and please do not make this ugly. Family doesn't keep receipts. Nora, do not start keeping them now. I want to tell you I fought. I did not fight. I was 32 years old. I had $1,100 to my name. My career was 6 years out of date, and my grandmother was 3 weeks in the ground. You do not fight in that condition. You survive in that condition." I spent that afternoon going through Esther's desk, and my mother was telling the truth about one thing. It was empty. Cleaned out during hospice. Down to the paper clips. So I packed. My whole life fit in 9 boxes and 4 trash bags. And on my way out of that house, past the shelf by Esther's chair, I took the blue cookie tin, not because I suspected anything, because it smelled like her hands. I put it in the last box between 2 towels, and I drove away from the porch light for the last time. Marcus watched me load the car from the steps. He did not help, and he did not look at me. And to this day, I think not looking at me was the only honest thing he did that whole year. If you have ever packed your life into a car while someone watched from a porch you paid to fix, I want you to type one word in the comments. Type the word strong, because that is what they call us right before they hand us the bill. You are the strong one. It has to be you. Type it. If it was you, I read every comment on these videos. And I want to know how many of us they built. Now, the rebuild. I am not going to give you a diary of my bad years, because you have lived your own version, and you do not need mine. Here is the shape of it. A studio apartment on the south side, with a window that faced a wall. A temp agency. A string of front desks. I slept 11 hours a night for a month, the way you do when a 6-year shift finally ends, and then one morning I got up, ironed the one blazer I owned, and went to an interview at a place called Old Dominion Title. Because the listing said receptionist, and I said yes to everything that year. I did not know what a title company was. I thought it had something to do with cars. I want you to sit with the size of that irony for a second. The woman whose house was taken with a piece of paper walked into the paper building by accident. That is where I met Gail. Gail was the senior examiner, somewhere north of 60. Reading glasses on a beaded chain. A woman who had spent 35 years reading land records, the way other people read novels. The first week, I asked her what exactly the job was, and she took off the glasses and gave me the sentence that reorganized my entire life. She said, "People forget, honey. Land does not. Every name that ever touched a piece of ground is written down somewhere. Waiting. I have thought about that sentence every single day since. I will think about it for the rest of my life. Because standing at that front desk, something in my chest sat up. Somewhere, in some courthouse, in some book, was every name that had ever touched Fenwick Street, including mine that never got written, including one signature I was not yet ready to think about. Gail caught me reading the training manuals on my lunch break and did not say anything. Just started leaving more of them on my desk. That is the whole story of our friendship. Honestly, she never once told me it would be okay. She never asked why a 32-year-old woman flinched when clients raised their voices. She just kept sliding paper toward me and letting me become someone. Within a year, I was pulling records. Within 2, I passed the state licensing exam. By the 4th spring after the letter, I was a full title examiner, which means banks and buyers paid me to trace the chain of title on a property. The chain of title is exactly what it sounds like. The complete list of every owner a piece of land has ever had. In order, deed by deed, like a family tree for dirt. My job was to walk that chain link by link and find the weak one, the forged link, the missing link. The link signed by someone who had no right to sign. It turns out I have a gift for it, Gail says. The best examiners are people who got lied to young. We do not skim. We check, 2 small things from those years. And then I will get to the Friday everything changed. First, the blue cookie tin sat on the shelf above my kitchen sink that whole time, unopened. I could not do it. Grief is strange about objects. I could pay the light bill, I could pass an exam, but I could not lift that lid. Because the day I opened it and it was just buttons would be the day she was fully gone. So it sat there, and I looked at it every morning while the coffee dripped. Second, my apartment did not have a porch, but the first month I lived there, I stuck a little battery lantern on a nail outside my door, and I turned it on every night at dusk. My neighbor thought I was odd. Maybe. But a lit door was how Esther told the street somebody was home. And somebody was expected. And I was not ready to be nobody, expected by no one. Some habits are not habits. Huff, they are vows you have not translated yet. During those 4 years, my family practiced their version of peace. My mother moved a renter into Fenwick Street. Within 2 months of my leaving, market rate. So much for the sacred family homestead. Marcus got a new truck that first fall, the big kind, the kind with a payment like a mortgage, and his kitchen got remodeled the following year. I saw it all on social media, the way we all watch our own exiles now, through a pane of glass with a thumbs up button on it. My mother sent me a text every few months. Always the same genre. Hope you are doing well. Grandma would want us close. No apology, no mention of the letter, just a soft fog of words designed to make the record disappear. I never answered. Keep those texts in mind, because a lawyer is going to find them very interesting later. And that brings us to the Friday. Stay with me now, because this is where it turns. It was a slow Friday afternoon in April. 4 years almost to the season since the letter. The office was quiet. My last file had closed early, and I did the thing I had been not doing, deliberately, carefully. For 4 years, the way you do not touch a sore tooth. I opened the county land records, and I typed in the address on Fenwick Street. I want to be clear about something, because it matters to how this ends. Land records are public. Any person, any day, can look up any property. I was not sneaking anywhere. I did not belong. That is the entire, beautiful, terrible point of a recording system. It exists so that everything is written down, and anyone can check. My mother did her business in a system whose whole purpose is memory, and then told me family does not keep receipts. The chain came up on my screen. I scrolled past a century of strangers, past the deed where Esther and my late grandfather bought the place, back when the neighborhood was new, and then, near the top, the last link, the quitclaim deed, Esther May Prewitt, to Lorraine Calloway. I had seen it once before, for 30 seconds, on a porch, through tears, when I was nobody. Now, I read it the way I read documents, for a living. 4 years of training, sat forward in my chair, and within 90 seconds, I found 2 things the frightened 32-year-old on that porch could never have seen. Thing 1. The date. The deed was signed on March 11th. I knew that spring. I had lived that spring. That was the spring of the woman, with the leather binder. That was the year. The neurologist sat me and my mother down in a beige office and told us Esther's decline was, her word, significant, and a memory I had buried came up whole. Like a photograph, out of a drawer, a pen on the table next to a sleeping woman who had not written anything in a year. March 11th was almost certainly the very Tuesday. I came home early. My mother had not found some magic lucid hour. She had walked a document into the fog and pulled a signature out of it. Thing 2. The stamp. The notary seal at the bottom belonged to Miss Odette from church. Every notary seal carries the notary's name and, in our state, their commission expiration, because a notary is only a notary while the state says so. Checking a notary's status is one of the most routine things an examiner does. It is a public database. It takes 11 seconds. I typed in her name, and the screen told me, in plain gray letters, that Miss Odette's notary commission had expired in November. The deed was stamped the following March, 4 months after her authority ended, which means that stamp, the little purple seal that made the whole transfer look official, was legally worth exactly nothing. On the day it hit that paper, the one witness whose entire job was to protect my grandmother from that moment was not. On that day, a notary at all, I sat very still at my desk. While the office carried on around me, I did not cry. I did not shake. Or, what I felt was colder and stranger than anger. And I have only ever found one word for it: recognition. The broken link. I find broken links. 40 hours a week for strangers. I had just found the one that broke me. Gail walked past, read my face in about a second and a half. Because she has spent 35 years reading things. And stopped. I turned my monitor toward her. She put on the reading glasses. She read the deed, and I watched her eyes go to the date. And then I opened the notary database in the next tab, and I watched her eyes go to the expiration. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she took the glasses off, folded them, and said, "Well, somebody is going to have a very bad summer, and it will not be you." I drove home that evening with my hands at 10 and 2, doing the speed limit exactly. The way you drive when your whole body is one held breath. I walked into my apartment. I put my keys down, and I looked up at the shelf above the sink, at the blue cookie tin. And I heard her voice, 4 years late, and right on time. The tin. Baby, it is in the tin. I lifted it down. It was heavier than a tin of buttons, has any business being. I sat on my kitchen floor, because some things should not be opened standing up. And I worked the lid off, on top, exactly what you would expect. The sewing tray. Buttons, thread, the thimble, a bent crochet hook. I lifted the tray out. Underneath, where the coupons should have been, was a large brown envelope, folded once to fit, with my name on it in Esther's handwriting. Not Nora, baby girl. That is what was written on the envelope. Baby girl. Inside were 2 things. The first was her will, the original, signed, dated, 5 years before her death. 2 witnesses, everything a court could ask for. It left her personal savings to be split between her 2 daughters, my mother and my aunt. It left the house on Fenwick Street, and I am going to quote the line because I have it memorized. To my granddaughter Nora Calloway, who kept the light on, who kept the light on. She saw. All those years I thought I was invisible, flipping that porch switch at dusk. And she was watching me do it, and she wrote it into a legal document, and it named me executor, the person in charge of carrying her wishes out. My mother had torn that house apart during hospice looking for this paper. It had been 10 feet from Esther's chair the entire time, sleeping under a sewing tray. In the one object in that house nobody would ever think was worth anything, my grandmother hid her, well, the way she did everything, in plain sight, disguised as something humble. The second thing was a bank passbook from a little credit union out by the old fairgrounds, for a savings account in Esther's name, held in trust for me. If you have never seen a passbook, it is a booklet where every deposit gets stamped, line by line, like a diary written in numbers. The first deposit was $50, made the month I was born. The next was $50. A month later, and the next, and the next. $50 a month, every month, for 26 years, until the month before her stroke. 312 deposits. $15,600, and with a small account, small interest. The last line read $16,340. My mother never knew. It existed. It never passed through the checkbook she controlled for 26 years, in a family where I was the strong one who needed nothing. One person had been quietly keeping a record of my worth, $50 at a time. That is when I cried, the only time in this whole story. So, let it count. Not on the porch with the letter, not at the desk with the deed, but alone, on my kitchen floor, holding a booklet of stamped 50s. Crying so hard I had to put the will back in the envelope, so nothing landed on it. I was not crying about the money, and I was not even crying about the house. I was crying because family doesn't keep receipts had been the law of my life. And it turned out to be a lie, in both directions. My mother kept meticulous receipts. She just kept them secret and kept them loaded. And my grandmother kept receipts, too. 312 of them. Hers just said, "On every line, I saw you, I see you." Still, the next morning, I did not call my mother. I want you to notice that, because it is the hinge of everything that follows. The old Nora would have called, voice shaking, demanding answers, and handed my mother a 6-month head, start to lawyer up and rehearse. The woman on that kitchen floor had spent 4 years learning exactly how paper wins fights. Paper does not shout. Paper does not shake. Paper waits in the correct order until it is unanswerable. So instead of calling my mother, I took a Monday off and I went to see a probate attorney 2 floors up from my office. A quiet man Gail had trusted for 20 years. Probate, if the word is new to you, is simply the court process that sorts out what a dead person's paper is worth. I put 4 documents on his desk. In order, the original will, the passbook, a printout of the quitclaim deed, which he immediately nicknamed the kitchen table deed, and the name stuck, and a printout from the state notary database showing Miss Odette's commission. Had died 4 months before her stamp did. He read for 10 minutes, without speaking. Then he looked up and asked me one question. He asked, "Was there ever a medical opinion about your grandmother's capacity around the date of this deed?" And I said, "I believe there is a letter. I was in the room when it was discussed." And he smiled the way lawyers smile when the other side has already lost and does not know it yet. And he said, "Then, here is what is going to happen. As executor named in a valid will, you are going to file that will with the probate court, which is your legal right, and, frankly, your legal duty. We are going to petition the court to set aside the kitchen table deed, and through the court, formally and properly, we will request your grandmother's medical records. Everything by the book," he said. "People like your mother only lose to the book. The records came the way court documents come. Slowly, and then all at once. And there it was. A letter from Esther's neurologist, dated March 4th of the deed year, written for the family after that beige office meeting, stating in plain clinical language that Esther May Prewitt was no longer capable of managing her legal or financial affairs, and should not be executing documents. March 4th. The deed was signed. March 11th. 7 days. My lawyer took to calling it the 7-day letter, and in the hearing that followed, those 2 dates sat side by side on one page, and no amount of church face could pull them apart. My mother had been handed a doctor's letter saying her mother could not sign, and 1 week later, she put a pen in her mother's hand. There was more. Court discovery. Let us see the account records my mother had guarded for 6 years. And 18 months of them told a simple story, beginning the month after the 7-day letter. Withdrawals from Esther's checking began that had nothing to do with Esther. $1,300 a month after month. For 18 months, that is $23,400. To make that number feel like what it is, that is more than everything I spent, keeping her house warm and lit for 6 years. Taken in a year and a half, the money lined up, almost to the week, with a truck down payment and a kitchen remodel across town. A power of attorney is permission to act for someone, not permission to act on them. There is a name for using it to feed your own household. And the court would eventually use that name. And one more voice joined the paper, my aunt, Town-to-Aim. When the petition was filed, she called me for the first time in years, and she said, "I have been waiting 4 years for someone to ask me." She had witnessed the will. She had driven Esther to the legal clinic herself on a good day. At Esther's own request, and she gave the court a sworn statement saying so. I asked her why she never told me sooner. She was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "Because your mother buries people who speak up, honey." And I only had the courage to be second. I have decided not to judge her for that. Second is still a witness. Second still counts. Now, the reckoning. And I need you to understand what it was not. It was not a screaming match. There was no thrown glass, no crowd, no scene. I had promised myself one thing on that kitchen floor. She would hear it from me before she heard it from a court envelope. Not as mercy, but because I wanted her to know it was me, that it was built, not stumbled into, that the strong one had done this on purpose. So, on a Sunday afternoon in June, 4 years almost to the day since the letter, I drove to my mother's house. Marcus's truck was in the driveway, which suited me fine. My mother opened the door, already wearing the patient smile, and said, "Well, look who finally came home." I walked to her kitchen table. I did not sit. I laid 3 pieces of paper down, one at a time, and turned them around, so they faced her. Which is the moment you heard at the start of this story, and I said the following, in order, in a voice I kept as flat as a recorded deed. 1. This is Grandma's original will, signed and witnessed 5 years before she died. It leaves the house on Fenwick Street to me, and names me executor. It was filed with the probate court 11 days ago. 2. This is the deed you recorded. It was signed 7 days after her neurologist wrote that she could no longer sign legal documents. I was in the room when that letter was explained to you. So were you. 3. This is the state's own record showing that the notary stamp on your deed expired the November. The seal on your paper was not worth the ink on the day. Miss Odette pressed it down. Then I said, "I am not here to argue. I am here to inform. The court has all of it. You will be hearing from my attorney and from the estate about 18 months of withdrawals as well. And Mom, I kept the receipts. Every one. One. It turns out somebody in this family always did." My mother's face went through its whole repertoire in about 4 seconds. The patient, smile. The wounded, flinch. The hostess, smoothing. And then, when none of them landed, something I had never seen before. Blankness. The face of a person whose one true belief, that Nora will absorb it, Nora always absorbs it, had just stopped being true. Marcus stood in the doorway to the living room and said, "You would really do this to family?" And I looked at him, and I said the only sentence I had prepared for him. I said, "I learned everything I know about what family would really do on a porch 4 years ago." Holding a letter, you watched her hand me. He did not answer. He looked at the floor, which, again, is the closest thing to honesty he owns. I picked up my papers, squared the pages the way I do 40 times a day at work, and I let myself out. 19 steps from her table to my car. I counted them. It is a strange thing to know about yourself, that your freedom is exactly 19 steps long. What followed took 7 months, which in court time is a sprint. I will give you the verdicts plainly, because I promised myself that if I ever told this story, I would not mumble the ending. The court set aside the kitchen table deed. Void. In the written order, the judge found that Esther May Prewitt lacked the capacity to execute a transfer on March 11th, and noted in a footnote My lawyer read to me twice over the phone that the instrument was defectively notarized in any event. Defectively notarized in any event. 11 words of dry courthouse language, and they landed in my chest, like church bells. The house on Fenwick Street came back into the estate, and the estate followed the will. And the will said what it had always said, hidden under a sewing tray, to my granddaughter, Nora Calloway, who kept the light on. The estate also pursued the withdrawals, and the court ordered my mother to repay the $23,400 she had moved out of Esther's account. After the 7-day letter, she did not have it in cash. The big truck went up for sale that same fall, 3 years old, listed by owner, and the repayment came into the estate in installments. Month after month. I want you to hold that image for a second, because the universe rarely writes this neatly. For 6 years, I paid out $310 a month to keep her mother safe, and was told that keeping track would be ungrateful. Now an envelope arrived every month with my mother's handwriting on it, addressed to the estate of the woman she robbed. Care of the executor, care of me. She spent 11 months keeping receipts, because a court ordered her to. Payable to the one account in the world she could not talk her way around. And Miss Odette, I did not have to lift a finger in anger there. And I did not. I did what a licensed title professional is supposed to do when she finds a defective notarization. No more and no less. I reported the stamp to the state office that commissions notaries, with the documents attached. Their review found she had kept right on stamping for months after her commission lapsed. Dozens of documents across the county. Ours, just one of them. Her commission was permanently revoked, with a fine. And every document she stamped in that window got a second look from someone like me. She stood up in her own hearing and said she had only ever been trying to help people. I believe her, actually. That is the part that should frighten you. Half the harm in this world is notarized by helpers who never checked whether they still had the right. My mother did not go quietly. I promised you the truth, so here is the truth. The night after the deed was voided, she left me 7 voicemails between 9 p.m. and 1 in the morning. I saved them all. They travel a perfect arc, and I have listened to them exactly once, the way you look at an X-ray. The first is syrup. Nora, honey. This has all been a terrible misunderstanding. The third is scripture. The 5th is threats about lawyers she never hired. And the 7th, at 1 in the morning, is just her breathing for a while. And then one sentence. You were supposed to be the strong one. Even then. Even at the bottom of the 7th voicemail of a lost war. The job title, not I am sorry. Not I miss you. Just a manager. Bewildered that the equipment had filed a grievance. Then came the church campaign. Because there is always a church campaign. Word went around that I had dragged my grieving mother into court over a house. That I had turned my back on family. For a season, that story had an audience. But small towns and church pews run on documents too. In their own way, and court orders are public. And my aunt is not silent anymore, and audience is thin. She showed up at Old Dominion Title once, the following spring, and asked the front desk for me. Loudly, I came down to the lobby. She started a speech she had clearly rehearsed in the car about forgiveness and blood, and how Grandma would be ashamed. I let her finish. Everyone deserves to finish. Then I said one sentence, the only one I had for her, and I have not needed another since. I said, you have my attorney's card, and the number on it works. And I walked back through the door I am licensed to walk through, and she stood in a lobby full of paper. The one substance on this earth she never managed to beat. If you are waiting for the reunion scene, I am going to disappoint you on purpose. There was no tearful Thanksgiving. There is no arc where my mother sees the light. Because my mother does not believe in light, she cannot rent out. What there is this. My aunt comes over on Sundays now, and we drink coffee. And sometimes she tells me stories about Esther as a young woman that nobody ever told the strong one. Because the strong one was always in the kitchen working. And on moving day, my niece, Marcus's oldest, rode her bike the whole way across the neighborhood without telling anyone, and stood in the yard on Fenwick Street, and asked if the house was really great-grandma's and really mine now. I said yes to both. She asked if she could still come by, like when she was little. I said the door is open to anyone who shows up with clean hands, and no folder. She did not get the joke. Someday she will. She comes by most weeks now. Whatever this family did to itself, it stops upstream of her. I have seen to it. It is all written down. Because, yes, I live in the house on Fenwick Street. I did not sell it, though the appraisal said $210,000. And the estate lawyer said no one would blame me. Some inheritances are money. This one was ground. I repainted the porch, the same gray, and I fixed the dryer that never got fixed. And I put the blue cookie tin back on the shelf by the good chair, where it had stood guard for 4 years without me knowing it. The sewing tray is still in it. The will is framed on the wall of the little room where I do my paperwork now. One page of it, the page with my name, and the passbook from the credit union sits in the tin where she left it. Closed out now. The $16,340 moved quietly into an account. I add $50 to every month, same amount. Same day of the month. She always used. It is not for me. It is in trust for a girl who rides her bike over on weekends, and she will not find out until she is grown. And the first line of that record started the month. I moved home. Some receipts are bills. I learned that early. Some receipts are love letters, written in deposit stamps. I learned that late, on a kitchen floor. And I intend to spend the rest of my life writing them. My mother had a saying. Family doesn't keep receipts. She said it when I paid for the water heater. She said it when I asked about the accounts. She said it on the porch, with the letter in my hand, 30 days on the clock, 3 weeks after the funeral, and she was wrong. Twice. Family keeps receipts. Constantly. Hers were weapons, and she hid them. Esther's were devotions, and she hid those too, under a sewing tray, in a tin, next to her chair. Waiting for the granddaughter who read paper for a living to finally come home and lift the lid. Family doesn't keep receipts. Mom, but the county does. The credit union does. The neurologist did, and the state did, and in the end, so did I. It turns out, I was the strong one, after all. Just not the kind you built, the kind that checks. And every evening now, at dusk, I walk to the front door of the house that knows whose it is. And I flip the switch, and the porch light comes on over Fenwick Street. The way it did for 6 years. The way it will for as long as I am here. A lit porch is how a house tells the street somebody is home. And somebody is expected. I am home. I am expected. She saw to it. It was all written down. That is my story. 1 blue tin, 1 expired stamp. 7 days between a doctor's letter and a stolen signature, and a porch light that never really went out. If you have ever been the strong one, the one they counted on for everything and counted as nothing, Share this video with somebody who is still carrying that title alone, and tell them what I wish someone had told me on that porch. Being the strong one is not the insult they meant it to be. It just comes with homework. Check the paper, keep the receipts, and leave your light on. Subscribe if you want more stories like mine. Drop the word strong below if it found you. And I will see you in the next one.